Kevin, it's interesting. It's almost a little bit too early to position ourselves now because of the closeness in the race. But let's hypothesize if it was a Trump win, what would we think? And in particular, how does it impact Canada? Because I'm thinking he's talked about a weaker US dollar as being favorable, and he's been talking about that for 30 years. So will we see a reacceleration of the Canadian dollar? Will we see commodities therefore also move higher? Will we like hard assets? What does it do from a tariff perspective? I know that's a lot of questions, but how do you think a Trump win affects Canada?
Yeah, I actually, again, I have stake in both games. I'm a citizen in both countries, so um, I think for Canada, I think that a more benign outcome is actually Kamala Harris at this point. There's no
Hmm.
love lost between Trump and the Canadian government from back when he was president. I think he is outraged over and just take the USMCA, the revised NAFTA. That gets a potential relook in 2026. There's the view, if you listen to his people counseling him on trade, like Robert Lighthizer, right? It's not just going to be about significant tariffs in China. It could be tariffs on a lot of trading partners, right? I think
Hmm.
when you get to the relook of NAFTA, and it's pretty clear the U.S. is going to raise their hand and ask for one. It's going to be about a lot of people looking the other way in terms of Mexico allowing Chinese parts in cars that are coming through under NAFTA. There's going to be a whole series of things, I think, that when you listen to Trump and his view of what he wants the U.S. to stand for in trade, that won't benefit Canada and certainly not Mexico if they win. So I do think trade
Kevin,
is going to be a big deal.
yeah. Yeah, but Kevin, let me just stop you there for 1 second because I had this conversation with another portfolio manager about what a Trump win would look like, and is it Trump 2.0? In other words, a
Mhm.
revisit of USMCA, et cetera. And he said no. He said it's a completely different world now, and that it will be a different Trump. That's a very out of consensus view. I don't think you agree with it. I don't know that I agree with it either. However, he is right in some ways when you think about the geopolitics that have been occurring, the spheres of influence that have been dramatically changed, and I mean deglobalization and new alignments and new relationships, Russia, China. Do you not think he might look at the world a little bit different today versus then? And therefore, what does that look like? And maybe it's more cohesive of an approach with North America.
Uh, I mean, that's a nice story. I'm not
I
sure I'm
know.
there yet.
I
I'm not sure
know.
I'm there yet with it. But let me take the optimist side of it. Okay, let's try this for a minute.
Okay.
Um, he can't run. He can't run again. So maybe there's a view that his legacy is going to be something more benign. So I'll take that. I
Mm-hmm.
think if he gets his way on immigration, maybe that's enough in terms of what he wants out of Mexico. So therefore, trade falls into a backseat. Maybe his trade issue really only at the end of the day is with China, and by jumping these tariffs to a much greater degree. If that's the case, yeah, then I think maybe your former guest who was
Mm-hmm.
espousing this might be right. I just don't put a lot of high probability on it right now, given the rhetoric that you kind of hear about it. But let's stay that
Mm-hmm.
for a minute. China clearly is going to be a loser on either administration, probably less so under a Harris administration. Probably existing tariffs may go up a little bit more, but Trump has talked about really sizing these up. And think about half of the things we import come from China essentially, that end up as an intermediary good and something else somebody makes in the U.S. Take that case.
Mm-hmm.
If you really ratchet them up in the first instance, that producer of that good has either got to raise prices to cover that cost. If he does that, that's inflationary, or he
Yeah.
eats it in his profits, and therefore not good if you own the stocks. So you can't have this both ways. They got away with it the first time because the size of that tariff was relatively small compared to what they're talking about now. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the bigger one. And I say, what does that mean for U.S. reshoring, right? I think it's been pretty clear that Trump wants to see jobs brought back. You listen to he and JD Vance, and this is about jobs in the middle class. So the idea that we're going to put tariffs on China and make people come back, that too feels a little bit wishful. I think you end up in places like India, and those
Mm-hmm.
become beneficiaries of a Trump administration on trade, right?
Hmm.
So again, maybe the emerging markets looks different. Maybe China struggles, but maybe some of the other places become beneficiary. Maybe Latin America ex Mexico becomes a beneficiary. But I
Mm-hmm.
still think Mexico wins either way on this because if you were on a reshore, it's probably the closest place, or near shore, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Interesting as well, which I want to get your thoughts on because I know you've been favorable towards Japan. It was interesting to me. I was reading one of your analyst notes about the percentage of semiconductors and where they're built, and it's 70% in Taiwan. And where does that leave North America on a supply side front? We'll be right back.